My friends and relations, hello. This is chapter 3. We have established that there is an author. The author has a intelligent design, and that design is benevolent. Love is the law that rules. But now we're a few days away from Christmas, and I want to talk to you about my faith, the reason for the season. Before I do, let me tell you that I have numerous friends and colleagues that they have their own faiths and their own backgrounds, and I've talked to some of them about the reasons for their faiths and historical reasons, and it's all good. I believe that God has many different names and aspects, and we relate to God however we need to relate to God. But for me, the culmination of all this is in Christ. And I want to talk to you about some of the historical evidence of Christ. I could go on about numerous points, but I think these are the most relevant. First of all, Christ a person. Many people say that Christ didn't exist. Yeah, he existed. Of course, the gospel writers were biased, but there are outside sources from outside the Christian tradition. The most well-known and most cited is Josephus, a historian of the time, but there's also Pliny, a Roman historian. There is Tacitus, who a Roman senator. These are the three most prominent names. Now, a criticism of the whole gospel Christian account is that these gospels aren't authentic and the writers aren't authentic. That they conspired to write what they did. They conspired to align their accounts. They conspired to write, to have Christ reference prophecies from the Old Testament. But here's the thing. This kind of thing, even in this day and age, takes a long time. Back then, there was no internet. Back then, there wasn't even a printing press. Back then, there were no speedy ways of communication other than going to someone and speaking to them and hand-delivering documents. These documents of the Gospels were disseminated soon after Christ's death. They were written, all four of them, soon after Christ's death. And the idea of getting all these people together to conspire, not just the gospel writers, but the entire Christian community, it's nonsense. Too many moving parts. Also, Christ himself, many people have said he's well-meaning, but obviously unbalanced, insane. I have experience with people who are mentally imbalanced. I have experience with the insane. They are not consistent. They have no discipline. Christ reliably demonstrated consistency of thought, of speech, of expression, of behavior. Christ was real. Christ believed everything that he said, and his message did not vary. So let's go to the scene at the Garden of Gethsemane. It's obvious that at least several hours, maybe the entire night, elapsed between the end of the Last Supper and Christ being arrested. Now, Judas had already made plans with the high priest to facilitate this arrest, but obviously the priest didn't expect it to happen the night before the Passover feast. They were completely caught off guard. So you think that Judas would have just gone, hey, I got him, and got the soldiers and came back and arrested him. But there was a delay of hours, which means that the Romans had, or I should say the Jews the high priest had to negotiate with the Roman government, which means Caiaphas and Pilate. The whole thing was highly unusual, and the immediate result was a trial in the dead of night, not a public trial, in the dead of night, which is against the law, against the Hebrew law of the time. Whole thing was highly unusual. So four different writers were writing about this highly unorthodox thing that never happened. Yeah, these days people write about these unorthodox things all the time. It's called fiction. Back then, no. So you have this trial, and the high priest couldn't find anything really to pin on Jesus that the Romans would take seriously. Finally, they decided to concentrate on the whole, I will destroy the temple and raise it up, build it back up again in 3 days. And again, Christ mentioned that numerous times throughout the gospel. It would take time to get to arrange the Gospels, all four Gospels, to align with that testimony. They didn't have that kind of time. And then it still wasn't enough. So Caiaphas decided to invoke the oath of testimony. And Christ, being a believer in the law, right, he said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Caiaphas asked him, are you the Son of God? And Christ was compelled to answer, and he said, yes, I am. And a not insane man, a perfectly sane, reasonable man said, yes, I am. So, let us now go to the tomb on Sunday. Huge boulder pushed away. Huge boulder pushed away. It would have taken a team of people, team of strong men, strong women to push this away. It's been suggested that Christ's friend, Joseph of Arimathea, arranged this. But Joseph of Arimathea was a well-known, well-respected gentleman. The idea that he's going to sneak into or arrange an incursion into a graveyard in the middle of night to take away the most well-known person in the cemetery, that would be risking a lot. No. And I forgot about something. Christ also, the whole idea of him being arrested there at the Garden of Gethsemane, one of the most well-known spots, one of the most well-renowned and respected spots for the Jews in that area on the eve of Passover. If you wanted to be seen, that was the place to be seen. If you wanted to avoid getting arrested, that is the place to avoid. So Christ obviously knew what he was doing. He arranged this. He wanted to be arrested. So let's go back to the grave. The stones pushed away. No way Joseph did it. And the idea that anybody came along and it had to be a small army of people to move the boulder, then to take away the body. The idea that the three soldiers fell asleep, nonsense. They fall asleep, all three of them. They are going to be executed. Their lives are forfeit. The idea that they got bribed, nonsense. Their lives are forfeit. The soldiers are gone. The boulder is moved. The body is gone. Again, this also takes a lot of effort and coordination. And then Mary Magdalene and her friend Salome come along, and I want to really emphasize this. The gospel writers emphasize that it was the women who were the first believers, and the women who ran back to the apostles and persuaded them, convinced them, all but Thomas, of the reality of Christ's resurrection. A lot of authority is vested in the women in our midst. But aside from that, you have a reliable person in Jesus. You have reliable eyewitnesses. You have accounts written at the moment. They line up. There are little discrepancies, but yeah, discrepancies happen. You can have two people in a room witness something and then be asked, what did you just see? And you're going to get discrepancies. But for the most part, if they witness the same thing, you're going to get the gist of the story aligned. And then turns out that Christ did exactly what he said he would do. Take it down, build it up. Die, resurrect. I am the Son of God. Conclusion. Christ is real. Christ is real. Christ is real. And in a few days, we celebrate his birthday. In a few days, all these events coalesce around this one huge event. So, however you relate to God, let me just tell you, Christ is real. God is real. Allow him, and I believe in the masculine God, allow him to move in your life. You want to say her, you want to say them, fine. But allow God to move in your life. Realize that God is the connective tissue that binds us all, gives us purpose, and make this life that we are building upon, not just individually and in our families, but in nations, globally, in our communities, gives meaning and purpose to all of this. And the only last thing I have for you before chapter 4 is God bless us, everyone.